In 1969, 600 million people watched two men walk on the moon. It was, at the time, the single most witnessed event in human history. In 2026, a significant share of the generation born after it happened doesn't believe it was real. The moon landing didn't change. The footage didn't change. The physics didn't change. Something else did. This isn't a video about proving the moon landing happened. Plenty of people have tried that for over 50 years, with diminishing returns. This is a video about something stranger. Somewhere between 10 and 36% of Americans currently believe the Apollo missions were staged. That's not a fringe rounding error. That's tens of millions of people. And the number isn't shrinking, it's growing. In 1999, Gallup found that 6% of Americans doubted the moon landing. By 2021, that number had roughly doubled to 12%. After 2 more decades of documentaries, retrospectives, satellite imagery, and near total access to information. Here's the detail that should stop you. It's not older skeptics driving that number. Adults between 18 and 34 are around 6 times more likely to believe NASA staged the landing than the generation that watched it happen live on their own televisions in real time. The people with the most evidence available to them are the ones most willing to doubt it. More information was supposed to mean more certainty. It didn't. The internet doesn't hand us facts. It hands us thousands of competing stories, all fighting for the same 6 seconds of attention. And the most dramatic one usually travels faster than the most accurate one, because believing it feels like discovering something everyone else missed. So this was never really a story about photographs or flags or rocket engines. Every major claim has already been investigated, documented, and re-explained, and none of it has slowed the belief down. Which leaves a bigger question than whether we landed on the moon. If the evidence never changed, what did? To find that out, we have to go back to one man almost nobody had heard of before 1976. The moon landing conspiracy didn't start with YouTube or talk radio or social media. It started with a single person carrying a single idea at almost exactly the right moment in American history. His name was Bill Kaysing. Kaysing was a former U.S. Navy officer who spent time as a technical writer for Rocketdyne, one of the companies that helped build the engines for the Saturn V rocket. He wasn't an engineer. He had no background in aerospace design, propulsion, or orbital mechanics. In 1976, he self-published a book called We Never Went to the Moon, America's $30 billion swindle, arguing that NASA simply didn't have the technology to pull off a crewed landing. That single claim, unqualified, unreviewed, and later thoroughly disproven, became the root system for almost every moon hoax argument that followed. The missing stars, the waving flag, the strange shadows, Stanley Kubrick, a rock with a letter etched into it, different branches, same route. NASA couldn't have done it, so it must have faked it. Here's what tends to get missed. Ideas don't spread because they're true. They spread because they arrive at the exact moment people are already looking for a reason to believe them. And Kaysing couldn't have timed his book better if he'd tried. Because by the mid-1970s, Americans had just learned, in the most public way imaginable, that their own government really was capable of lying to them. Kaysing's book didn't succeed because people forgot how science worked. It succeeded because America had just lived through one of the largest collapses of institutional trust in its history. In 1971, the leaked Pentagon Papers revealed that the government had been systematically misrepresenting the true state of the Vietnam War for years to the same public that had trusted it. Then came Watergate, a break-in that unraveled, month by month, into one of the most damaging cover-ups in American political history and ended a presidency. Picture living through that stretch, night after night, another headline confirming that powerful institutions could lie at scale and nearly get away with it. And someone in that climate a book claiming the moon landing was staged too, and it doesn't sound absurd. It sounds like one more secret waiting to be uncovered. That skepticism wasn't irrational. It had been earned. And it didn't fade when the headlines did. Parents passed the story down. Documentaries kept it circulating. The internet gave it a permanent home. Eventually, people inherited the distrust without ever living through the events that created it. The conspiracy outlived its own context. That's the part worth sitting with. Most believers were never rejecting science. They were reacting to a real betrayal, then aiming that reaction at the wrong target. They'd learned that governments hide things, so they went looking for more of it and started connecting dots that were never actually connected. The instinct was reasonable. The conclusion wasn't. Once trust breaks, every unanswered question starts looking like proof. A missing star, an odd shadow, a flag that moved the wrong way. None of it created the conspiracy by itself. It stuck because the ground was already prepared to catch it. But distrust alone doesn't explain everything. Could a secret this size actually survive intact for over 50 years? That's a question you can actually run the numbers on. Forget the photographs for a moment. In 2016, Oxford physicist David Grimes approached the moon landing debate from a different angle. Using a statistical model, he estimated that if roughly 400,000 people involved in the Apollo program had been hiding a hoax, the conspiracy would likely have unraveled within about 3.7 years, not remained secret for more than half a century. That calculation doesn't prove Apollo happened, but it shifts the question from shadows and photographs to something much bigger. Could hundreds of thousands of scientists, engineers, contractors, and officials really have kept the same secret for decades without a single verified leak? For many believers, every explanation simply became further proof of the cover-up. At that point, the debate stopped being about evidence and became about trust, which is where history hands us one witness nobody could control. For 50 years, people have argued over flags, shadows, and camera angles. But the strongest evidence in this entire story has nothing to do with NASA. It comes from one country on Earth that wanted the moon landing to be fake more than anyone else alive in 1969: the Soviet Union. The Cold War wasn't just a political rivalry. It was a real-time scoreboard, and every launch, every satellite, every mission was another point on it. If the United States had faked putting a man on the moon, the USSR wouldn't have stayed quiet about it. Exposing that fraud would have been the single greatest propaganda victory of the entire Cold War. It never happened. Soviet tracking stations independently followed Apollo 11 to the moon and back, using their own equipment on their own timeline, not America's broadcast feed. Soviet scientists monitored the mission in real time. Soviet officials publicly congratulated the crew afterward. Not once, at any point, did the Soviet government claim the landing had been staged. A 2000 survey found that 28% of Russians personally doubted the moon landing. But the one institution on Earth with both the technology to verify it and every conceivable motive to expose a hoax, the Soviet government itself, never made that claim. The public questioned it. The people with the evidence didn't. They weren't alone either. Radio observatories in the United Kingdom tracked Apollo signals independently. Amateur operators around the world intercepted the astronauts' transmissions on their own equipment. Decades later, spacecraft from Japan, China, and India photographed the Apollo landing sites from orbit. Scientists still bounce lasers off the reflectors the astronauts left behind. None of it depends on trusting NASA's word alone. And still, the debate never really ended. Every famous claim has been investigated. Every technical objection has an answer. Every decade adds another independent confirmation. And still, the belief persists. Maybe that's the real story. Not what happened on the moon in 1969, but what happened to our ability to agree on what happened, even when the evidence never left. For 55 years, the one government on Earth with the motive, the means, and the opportunity to expose a fake has never done so. Sometimes, the greatest conspiracy isn't a lie that survived the evidence. It's inherited distrust that outlived the truth and learnt to aim at the wrong target. What do you think keeps this belief alive?